Okay, today I want to talk about racing line, and in particular how to drive and learn a track without the racing line. It's not particularly easy, especially when you're used to it, but I believe that the racing line could give you a good indication on how to take certain corners, but in the long run it's gonna impede your progress as a racing driver. And in general it's more realistic to drive without a racing line, because of course they're not there. You will see that it might sound complicated at first, but it's not as complicated as you might expect. What I'll do to demonstrate that is to drive at Fuji Speedway. The new track has been released in the last update, a track that I never dreamed into. The first suggestion that I could give you is to make some time trials with a car that you particularly understand, you particularly drive well, you know how it reacts. So this will help you to understand the racing line, and you could adapt this racing line with different type of cars. I'll take, for example, the Subaru WRX Group 4, a car that I particularly like. Is my go-to car for a lot of things. It's not as strong in this game, but I particularly enjoy drive this car. The important thing to notice here is which information do you get with the racing line, apart from the way you should approach the corner. It's also a matter of mostly the turning point and the braking point. Yeah, let's try to go on this track. This is my first lap ever on this track, so I don't know anything, and I will the first laps of course will be slow as fuck, and you'll make a lot of mistakes, but it's all a matter of the process. Your first laps will be not as effective as they would have been if you use the racing line, but on the other hand you will have a more effective knowledge on how to approach all other circuits. So I know from the map that there's a hairpin in front of me, so this should be an hard braking point. So there are markers that I could use on the side. Those first laps will be more explorative to understand where my marker should be. The marker could be anything, like the most obvious markers on the side of the road, like the 100 and the 50 meters board. But it could be something even more subtle, like for example this Goodyear sign on top. It could be one. Usually the curves themselves could be a fantastic turning point, because they don't change through time. Despite sometimes some of the 50-meter board and 100 board could be broken at during the race by another opponent, or by yourself too. So you will lose the brake mark as soon as you throw it away, basically. Really hard braking point. Oh, okay, where that was supposed to go here. I'm basically lost. Okay, yeah, it's embarrassing, but first lap here, so I'm justified. I believe they won is straight. That thing was straight there, because there's the other layout, which is basically the same track with that she can't throw away the trash. Ow, 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 ow. So that's the twisty part of the track, and then we are now okay, this one is the shape of this corner is interesting. It's okay to jump some corners. You don't have to try to make perfect all the corners and the one go. So for example, this twisty part will be particularly tricky, so I prefer to I prefer to learn the rest of the track first, the easy part of the track first, so I could concentrate just on the twisty part. And yeah, trying to understand. For example, other markers that you can use are the curbs. The curbs are great. The billboards, like this dollar one on the top. Also the color and the shape of the guardrail sometimes might help. For example, this one might be any braking marker. Those little patches of tarmac on the right hand side through that cut through the grass, those are great braking points, or not braking points, but in general markers. Those little marks on the right hand side, white marks on the left hand side, sorry, of the circuit. So this one could be a marker, any marker, I mean anything on the circuit. And your objective on the first few laps is to understand where those things are and try to memorize them. It's not going to take too long because the majority of the circuits are just few corners long, and they last no more than 1 or 2 minutes. So another marker is here on the left hand side is let me go back. This white mark here. So we process all this information, so we try to remember as many of those objects as possible. Then we're gonna on the other end of the equation we have the shape of the corner themselves. Each type of corner needs to be approached in a different way, and even the same type of corner have a different optimal racing line depending on what's behind and what's up ahead. So for example, this is an hairpin, and as all the hairpins we are trying to make as the exit as fast as possible, because especially here there's a there's a big straight behind, and there's some sort of a bigger acceleration point afterwards. So here instead there's this curve. This curve here, as you can notice, is not that tight, so I believe this one could be taken without applying the brakes, or by the very least applying just a tiny little brake. Now there's this big corner, long running corner, and I believe this one could be taken in 2 steps, especially because we're coming from a big acceleration point. That there's this corner here which has an opening exit, so we could accelerate. I need to go back to that corner because I haven't explained that correctly. So here we go again. We got this fast corner where we could just accelerate or tap the brake. Then we're gonna accelerate again. This one is long running corner, like a parabolica, or turn 4 I believe in Spain. So well, my plan here is to accelerate, then lift the throttle a little bit, so we're gonna be set for the entrance, correctly for the entrance of the next corner, which will be here. So accelerate, lift the throttle, accelerate again until a point between this 50-meter board and this 100-meter board there. Then there's this corner which it starts tight, but then it opens up. So this means that we are able to accelerate earlier than a normal tight corner, so we can take advantage of all the rest of the track. Then there's this part which is flat out, and then there's the twisty part of the track, which starts here with the big braking zone. Then we're gonna be here. Here we're gonna usually what you would have done in normal airpin is just to go into the outside, but because this one is a series of corners, we need to set up ourselves for the next part of the track. So we're gonna hug the inside here. So we're gonna set up for the exit here of the chicane, and here we're gonna accelerate again. Straight after that though, there's another right-hander, so we're gonna set up on the outside here, then we're gonna clip the apex here, we're gonna accelerate again. There's another corner which is interesting corner as it kind of closes up after the apex. So what you actually want to do, let's go back there. So what you ideally want to do is to enter the corner here, clip the first apex on the so clip the first apex here, take a double apex, so clip the first apex, go to the outside, then slow out again and turn again to this apex, and all the closing type of corners, so the type of corners that are wider at the beginning and they close at the end, needs to be taken in this way. So that's the same for the next one. So what you're gonna do is ideally have an apex and then close the corner afterwards, and that's especially important because the most important part of the circuits are the exit of the corners that lead to big straights, because the more time you lose on the exit of those corners, this will be multiplied by the length of the straight afterwards. So the last corner is very important, and I believe also the first corner is quite important too, and the corner up the big parabolica, because those are the main acceleration points. So if you lose time there, you lose time twice as more as, for example, making a mistake on one of the twisty parts of the track. So now what we need to do is to combine all this information that we have to understand which one of our markers we should use. What we could start is to start with turn 1. How do you understand that a marker is a good marker for a braking point? By trying to use one of the markers and analyze what's the behavior of the car. So what we're going to try at the beginning, we're going to try with a marker which is too far ahead towards the corner to be a good braking point. So let's start with the 100 meter mark. So what will happen if you pick up a point which is too close to the corner to be a braking point? This happens. Even if you decelerate as much as possible, you overshoot the corner. Let's start instead with something that is too far behind to be a good braking point. So this example will be too far behind to be a good braking point. For example, I'll take the 200 meter mark. This happens. So basically, you feel that you could still accelerate more and make the corner anyway. So you can kind of feel it that you could still hit the throttle and still make the corner. So something that it shouldn't happen when you pick your braking point correctly. The correct braking point for this corner, I believe, is the 150 meter board. So we're gonna try that. And that's a good braking point. That's a good braking point because we didn't overshoot the corner, and we couldn't accelerate more and still make the corner. So we are kind of on that kind of limit that we want to be in order to be faster on the racetrack. This doesn't mean that every marker you should brake at one specific marker all the time. The braking point, the correct braking point, could also be something in between. So for example, on the next corner, the perfect braking point is between the 100 and the 50 meter board. I didn't take it too well, but my point still stands. And in this case, we don't brake as hard because the corner doesn't require that. As we analyzed the corner earlier, that corner is a fast corner, so we shouldn't decelerate as hard as for the airframe, for example. Let's start now with some more subtle turning, some subtle markers. So for example, we understood that we could use some of those markers as our braking points, but how about using one of those markers to understand when to turn? And we got some examples here. So we accelerate out of this this chicane, is this low speed chicane, and the inertia puts us in this place. So when we do understand when to turn, in our case, what we could use as a marker is this bit of astroturf in between, this greenish, dark green. So as soon as it's finished, we could start to turn the car towards the apex. So we're gonna turn here. We're gonna lead us here. Then we have two markers that we could use, always using the green astroturf. So what I'll do is, actually it's a bit too early, a little bit too early here when the astroturf finishes here. But for example, my marker is when I leave the apex, the first apex, going towards the outside of the corner and making the second apex at the middle of the green astroturf, which is on the right hand side here. And then we square up the corner once again. The inertia will leave us here, and then after what I would say, a little bit after we left this bit of tarmac on the inside, I'll say a second after, or 2 seconds, we start to decelerate again, and then from about here, actually a little bit earlier than that, we could start to turn again towards the apex of the corner, the second apex, and propel us to the main straight. Going back to the big parabolica, what I'm using is also another type of marker which indicates where I should decelerate in the middle of the corner in order to not be forced to be on the outside. So So for example, there's this bit of paint, white paint here, and that's what I'm using to understand where I should start to decelerate after the exit of the other corner. So what I'm doing is accelerate, 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 accelerate. Then I found out this part comes outside of my view. I start to decelerate. I'll be pretty much here. Then when there's this bit of tarmac, I try to point at that bit of tarmac, and I try to modulate my throttle and my steering inputs so I can clip this, let's say apex, even though it's not an apex, but still this bit of tarmac there. So I'll set myself to the entrance of this corner here, which I'll take a braking point, a wide entrance here, and accelerate earlier than I usually do because it opens up.